What if I told you that behind the smooth beats and soulful voices of R&B, there were scandals and shocking truths that shook the industry to its core? From R. Kelly's multiple convictions to Usher's shocking confessions, these stories spread almost as fast as the music itself. Here are 15 disgusting R&B music rumors that actually turned out to be true. R. Kelly's abuse convictions. Among all the scandals that have scarred R&B, few are as disturbing and undeniable as the case of R. Kelly. For years, whispers followed him. Stories of inappropriate relationships with underage girls, quiet settlements, and troubling behavior swirled around his name while he continued to dominate the charts. For a long time, many dismissed these accounts as little more than gossip that comes with fame. What the courts eventually revealed, however, was far worse than even the speculation suggested. The evidence uncovered a pattern of abuse that lasted for decades. Survivors described how they were approached as teenagers, promised guidance in their music careers, and then pulled into situations where they were manipulated, controlled, and silenced. Prosecutors brought forward proof in the form of testimonies, documents, and video recordings that left little room for doubt. Kelly was not simply a star with poor judgment. He was found guilty of operating an organized system designed to exploit and control young women, using his fame as both lure and weapon. His convictions for illegal trade in persons and racketeering marked the collapse of a carefully built facade. What made it more disturbing was not just the crimes themselves, but the scope of his operation. Testimony showed how his managers, assistants, and even security played roles in restricting victims' movements, confiscating phones, and enforcing his rules. It was a machinery of exploitation, not isolated lapses. For decades, industry figures, insiders, and even journalists had pieces of this story, yet his career rolled on unchecked. While his music filled arenas and celebrations worldwide, behind the scenes there were locked rooms, silenced voices, and careers crushed before they began. When the full record came into view, it was no longer rumor, speculation. It was the exposure of a man who had built a kingdom on control and cruelty, and the ruins he left behind cannot be erased by any chart-topping hit. Diddy's adult misconduct. When the name Sean Diddy Combs comes up, most people think of his empire, the record label, the fashion lines, the vodka brand, the image of a man who turned himself into one of the most powerful moguls in music. But behind the glamour, lawsuits and federal investigations have uncovered a story that strips away the polished surface and reveals something far more disturbing. In 2024, multiple women, including his former partner Cassie Ventura, came forward with lawsuits that detailed abuse on a scale few could have imagined. The allegations described forced participation in adult acts, coerced substance use, and a web of intimidation meant to keep victims silent. Cassie's lawsuit painted a picture of years of manipulation and violence, and it was soon followed by others who described similar experiences. What pushed this beyond rumor and speculation were the federal raids on Diddy's homes, court filings that documented the claims, and the sheer consistency of accounts from people who did not know one another, yet told stories that lined up in chilling detail. The details carried weight because they reflected a system rather than isolated misconduct. Allegations described how associates facilitated encounters, how substance were supplied at parties, and how silence was enforced through threats to careers and reputations. These accounts exposed an environment where control was exercised not only through wealth but through fear, creating conditions that many insiders say had been whispered about for years, yet rarely challenged publicly. These lawsuits did more than tarnish a reputation. They suggested that what had long been dismissed as gossip had roots in calculated exploitation. Behind the glitzy events and the larger-than-life persona, there was evidence of manipulation, coercion, and violence that matched the industry's darkest rumors. For years, Diddy was celebrated as the embodiment of success in R&B and hip-hop culture. Now, the lawsuits and investigations have forced the industry to confront an uncomfortable truth. The empire was not only built on talent and ambition. According to these cases, it was also built on fear, exploitation, and silence that reached far deeper than most ever realized. Michael Jackson's abuse allegations. Few names in music carry as much weight as Michael Jackson. He was not just an R&B star, he was a global icon whose influence stretched across genres and generations. His performances set new standards, his music videos reshaped the industry, and his reach was unmatched. Yet behind the artistry and cultural dominance, there were accusations that never went away. Allegations of child abuse surrounded Jackson for decades, creating one of the most polarizing and painful scandals in the history of popular music. The rumors first broke into public view in the early 90s when a young boy accused Jackson of non-consensual abuse. The case was settled out of court for millions of dollars, and while no criminal conviction followed, the payout left a permanent shadow over his image. In the years that followed, more families stepped forward. Some cases were dismissed, others ended in settlements, but the pattern of allegations grew too large to be ignored. What made them chilling was their similarity. Children from different backgrounds described almost identical experiences of being welcomed into Jackson's private world, offered luxury, gifts, and access only for those privileges to come with inappropriate contact that left lasting scars. The release of the documentary Leaving Neverland decades later reignited the scandal on a global scale. Two men who had known Jackson as boys described in excruciating detail what they said took place behind the closed doors of Neverland Ranch. Their testimonies echoed the accounts that had surfaced years earlier, and for many viewers, it felt like confirmation of suspicions long brushed aside. Others rejected the claims, pointing to Jackson's 2005 acquittal on criminal charges as proof of innocence. Yet the combined weight of civil lawsuits, sworn statements, and investigative reporting painted a picture that was difficult to dismiss as fabrication. Michael Jackson remains one of the most celebrated entertainers in history, but the allegations are inseparable from his legacy. They force the music industry and fans alike to confront an uncomfortable question. How should the brilliance of the performer be remembered when the man himself is accused of inflicting such profound harm on children? Chris Brown and Rihanna brawl. In 2009, the world woke up to one of the most shocking scandals in R&B. Chris Brown, then one of the brightest young stars in music, was arrested for brutally assaulting Rihanna, who at the time was both his partner and one of the biggest artists on the planet. The photographs of Rihanna's injuries spread across every news outlet, making the incident impossible to dismiss or spin as rumor. What had once been a private relationship instantly became a public reminder of the reality of domestic violence. Chris Brown eventually pleaded guilty to felony assault, and court documents confirmed the disturbing details of what happened that night. This was not speculation. The evidence was undeniable. For an industry that often glosses over the darker behavior of its stars, this case forced a level of accountability that was rare. Brown's sentencing included probation, community service, and counseling, but the damage went far beyond the legal consequences. His public image collapsed almost overnight, and for many, his career seemed finished. What followed was a difficult and controversial path of rehabilitation. Some fans forgave him, pointing to his talent and youth. Others never looked past the images of Rihanna's bruised face. The industry itself seemed divided, torn between the commercial value of one of its leading stars and the moral weight of his actions. Rihanna, for her part, became an outspoken figure in discussions about abuse, showing resilience that reshaped how the public viewed her, not just as an artist, but as a survivor. This scandal remains one of the clearest examples of a rumor that was confirmed with undeniable evidence. It also showed the music world that even its brightest talents could not hide when the truth was this stark and visible. Lil Rod versus Diddy. If the Cassie lawsuit cracked open the door on Diddy's private world, the accusations from producer Rodney Lil Rod Jones kicked it wide open. Lil Rod was not an outsider with vague recollections or anonymous claims. He was a producer who worked directly with Diddy for over a year, deeply involved in music projects that placed him inside the daily orbit of one of entertainment's most powerful figures. His lawsuit, filed in 2024, painted a chilling portrait of what allegedly took place behind the walls of that empire, and it carried a weight that was difficult to dismiss because it came from someone on the inside. According to the court filings, Lil Rod accused Diddy of repeated SA, harassment, and coercion. He claimed he was pressured into situations he did not consent to, forced into hiring adult performers at Diddy's request, and subjected to behavior that crossed every personal and professional boundary. These were not whispers shared in backrooms or gossip traded among industry insiders. They were detailed accusations written into legal documents, complete with names, dates, and descriptions that aligned with troubling stories already emerging from other lawsuits. The sheer level of detail gave the case a credibility that could not be brushed off as speculation. What made Lil Rod's case especially significant was its source. He was not a former partner or distant acquaintance dredging up memories from the past. He was a working producer tied directly to Diddy's music, someone who had witnessed the inner workings of the empire firsthand. His lawsuit alleged that the image of a polished mogul was only a mask, concealing an environment where intimidation, manipulation, and exploitation operated unchecked. Federal investigators took the case seriously, and it quickly became part of a mounting storm of legal battles threatening to dismantle the carefully curated image of success Diddy had built over decades. For years, stories about wild parties and rumors of excess hovered around his name. Lil Rod's testimony suggested something far more sinister. It indicated that the culture within Diddy's orbit was not simply chaotic nightlife, but an organized system of control, where power was weaponized, fear was cultivated, and silence was enforced with precision. ODB's exploitation, Old Dirty Bastard, was marketed as the wild card of Wu-Tang Clan, the unpredictable genius who could light up a track and cause chaos in the same breath. Fans loved the spectacle, but what they were really watching was a man slowly unraveling before their eyes. For years, the rumor lingered that the label and the industry were not just standing by, but actively exploiting his instability, parading his addiction and erratic behavior because it made money. And when you look closely at the record, that rumor turned out to be true in the harshest way. ODB struggled relentlessly with substance, mental health, and poverty, despite being part of one of the most successful rap collectives of all time. His arrests became frequent. His public appearances often left him looking disoriented, and his outbursts made him both unpredictable and vulnerable. Instead of stepping in with meaningful support, the industry leaned on that image, weaving his chaos into the brand. Executives knew the headlines sold records, and so his pain became commodified. What should have been a clear signal for intervention was twisted into a marketing strategy that kept him trapped in a cycle of dysfunction. Even his time on welfare while supposedly enjoying the life of a platinum-selling artist was turned into a tabloid spectacle. Cameras followed him into government offices, catching the contradiction between public success and private struggle. To the outside world, it looked like outrageous comedy, another wild ODB stunt, but in truth, it was a man drowning, his suffering turned into entertainment with no safety net beneath him. By the time ODB collapsed and gave up the ghost in a recording studio at only 35 years old, his body worn down from years of substance abuse and neglect, it was too late to ask the question that should have haunted everyone around him. How many saw the warning signs yet looked the other way because the spectacle was profitable? That is the darkest truth behind the rumor. Old Dirty Bastard was never just unpredictable. He was a man exploited until he broke, and the system that profited from his chaos let him die in it. Milli Vanilli. Milli Vanilli were one of the most talked about acts of the late 80s and early 90s. And from the start, there were whispers that something about them was not real. The duo, Rob Pilatus and Fab Morvan, had the look, the choreography, and the energy, but many questioned whether the voices on their records truly belonged to them. For a while, the label denied it, but by 1990, the rumor burst wide open and the truth was exposed. The collapse began during a live performance when the vocal track malfunctioned and repeated itself while the pair continued dancing on stage. That glitch forced the industry to admit what insiders already knew. Rob and Fab had not sung a single note on their award-winning album. Every track had been recorded by studio vocalists, while the two men served as the public image. It was fraud on a massive scale, and it instantly destroyed the credibility of everyone involved. When the scandal broke, the backlash was immediate. Their Grammy for Best New Artist was revoked, a humiliation that has never happened before or since. Lawsuits followed as angry fans demanded refunds for albums and concerts that had been sold under pretenses. The duo became a punchline overnight, their careers erased almost as quickly as they had risen. Rob Pilatus in particular could not recover. The shame and public ridicule sent him into years of addiction, arrests, and personal decline, leading to his passing in 1998 at the age of 32. The truth behind the rumor was brutal. Milli Vanilli were not international stars who had fooled the world with their talent. They were the frontmen of one of the most brazen lies in modern music history. And once the curtain was pulled back, the damage was permanent. Beyoncé and Kellis. In 2022, when Beyoncé released her album Renaissance, it was instantly praised as a landmark project. But almost as quickly, another story began to spread. Kellis, known for her early 2000s hit Milkshake, accused Beyoncé of using her music without permission. At first, some thought it was just another case of an artist feeling overlooked, but the details confirmed that the rumor had weight. The controversy centered around the track Energy, which sampled elements of Milkshake. Kellis stated publicly that she had never been contacted, let alone asked for approval. The issue ran deeper than a simple sample. Kellis had long been outspoken about how she had been mistreated in her early career, particularly in contracts that left her without ownership of her own music. In this case, the credit went to the original producers Pharrell Williams and Chad Hugo, while Kellis, the voice and face of the song, was once again excluded. The dispute escalated quickly. Kellis went public with her frustration, calling out Beyoncé and the industry at large for continuing to sideline artists when it came to control over their own work. Within days of her speaking out, Beyoncé quietly removed the interpolation of Milkshake from Energy on streaming platforms. That decision alone confirmed that the sample had been used and that Kellis had not been informed, making it clear that the complaint was not baseless. The situation exposed more than just a creative disagreement, showing that one of the most powerful artists in the world had allowed a song to go out without respecting the involvement of its most recognizable contributor. The rumor that Beyoncé's Renaissance contained an uncredited use of Kellis's work was not just true. It was verified by the swift removal of the sample once the story broke. Usher's Confessions. When Usher dropped his album Confessions in 2004, it became one of the most successful R&B projects of its era. Fans were convinced the songs were a raw autobiography, especially tracks like Confessions Part 2, where Usher sings about impregnating another woman outside of his relationship. The rumor that spread across the industry was simple. Usher had cheated on his then-partner, Chili from TLC, and gotten another woman pregnant. For years, that story stuck. The details in the lyrics felt too personal to be fiction, and the timing matched the highly publicized end of Usher's relationship with Chili. Media outlets fueled the idea that the album was a musical diary, and many listeners took the songs as literal truth. The scandal gave Confessions a dramatic edge, making people feel they were listening to Usher spill his darkest secrets. But the truth behind the album was far more complicated. Usher himself admitted later that the songs were not purely his own story. While some inspiration came from his life, much of the material was based on the experiences of Jermaine Dupri, who produced the album. Dupree had gone through his own issues with infidelity and paternity rumors, and those situations heavily shaped the writing. Usher performed them with conviction, which blurred the lines between his real life and the character he presented on the record. The rumor was powerful because it fit the public narrative of Usher's breakup and because he never fully separated himself from the storyline at the time. Yet in reality, the infamous pregnancy confession was not his scandal. It was someone else's drama written into his music. The album may have changed his career, but the supposed truth fans thought they were hearing was never his own. If you are enjoying this video, show some love with a thumbs up. And if you have not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Whitney Houston's substance battles. Whitney Houston's voice was once described as a national treasure, but behind the stage lights, another story was taking shape. By the early 1990s, whispers had already begun about her dependence on substances. At first, the rumors circulated quietly, dismissed by fans who could not imagine the golden girl of R&B and pop tied up in that world. But as the years went on, the whispers became impossible to ignore. The most explosive moment came in 2002 during her infamous interview with Diane Sawyer. When asked directly about substance use, Whitney denied being addicted, but admitted to partying hard, even making the shocking "crack is whack" comment that followed her for years. That line, instead of silencing suspicion, only fueled it. Tabloids went into overdrive, and the rumor became a headline fixture. Concert cancellations, erratic behavior, and missed appearances only added more fuel to the story. By the mid-2000s, the rumors had turned into a confirmed reality. Whitney's turbulent marriage to Bobby Brown was often portrayed as the center of the chaos, with stories of fights, arrests, and wild binges. Behind the scenes, friends and industry insiders admitted what fans already feared. Whitney was battling a long and dangerous relationship with substance. Studio sessions were disrupted, tours collapsed, and her once flawless voice began to show the toll. Her public struggles reached a breaking point in the late 2000s, when attempts at a comeback were overshadowed by her fragile state. Sadly, in 2012, Whitney's life ended tragically in a Beverly Hills hotel room. The cause of death was officially listed as heart disease and drowning, but traces of substance in her system confirmed what had long been whispered and then openly spoken. The rumors of her substance battles had been true all along. Danity Kane and Diddy. Danity Kane was once positioned as the crown jewel of bad boys' push into R&B girl groups. They had the talent, the look, and the momentum to dominate the charts. But behind the scenes, the story was far from glamorous. Former members, especially Dawn Richard, have spoken openly about the abuse they say they endured while under Diddy's management, and those claims have since been tied to wider lawsuits against him. The most disgusting rumor, one that shocked fans when it turned out to be true, was that Danity Kane's breakup had very little to do with creative disagreements or personality clashes. Instead, it was rooted in abuse and intimidation from Diddy himself. Dawn and others revealed how they were screamed at, degraded in front of their peers, and constantly reminded that their careers could be destroyed at any moment if they did not comply. Some even recalled instances of physical contact that crossed professional boundaries, leaving scars that went far deeper than the headlines ever showed. To the public, Danity Kane looked like another girl group torn apart by fame, ego, and industry politics. Fans assumed the messy breakups and repeated failed reunions were the result of internal chaos. But the reality was that the group was operating under an environment of fear, where power was wielded not to nurture, but to control. The rumors of Diddy thriving on breaking down the very stars he built were not exaggerated gossip. They were supported by lawsuits and testimony that painted a disturbing picture of his empire. The tragedy of Danity Kane is that their immense potential was crushed long before it could truly flourish. Their downfall is not a story of failure, but a sobering reminder of how abuse behind the curtain can poison everything in the spotlight. Bobby Brown's wild reputation. Bobby Brown was one of the brightest stars to come out of R&B in the late 80s. But the shine of his success was quickly followed by a cloud of controversy. After leaving New Edition, his solo career took off with the release of Don't Be Cruel in 1988, an album that made him a household name. Yet behind the hits and the sold-out tours, there were already whispers of his reckless behavior. The rumors started with reports of his wild partying. Club promoters and industry insiders would speak of nights where Bobby was surrounded by substances, women, and an entourage that seemed to thrive on chaos. By the early 90s, his run-ins with the law became constant. He was arrested for drunk driving, disorderly conduct, and public fights, and the headlines always painted him as unpredictable and volatile. For many, it was difficult to separate his music from the scandals that seemed to follow him everywhere. Things escalated even further after his marriage to Whitney Houston in 1992. What should have been a union of two major stars became a constant tabloid story. Their arguments, arrests, and public appearances often fed the image of a couple in turmoil. The most persistent rumor of all was that Bobby was the one who introduced Whitney to substance use. It was a claim repeated so often in the media that it shaped how the public viewed both of them. Whitney herself later admitted that she had been experimenting with substances before meeting Bobby, but by that time the rumor had already become part of the narrative. True or not, it stuck. Bobby Brown was no longer just the voice behind some of the biggest hits in R&B. He became the face of scandal, the bad boy who seemed to burn through every ounce of goodwill his talent had earned. Diana Ross, Hidden Affairs. When people speak of Diana Ross, they remember the gowns, the poise, and the voice that carried Motown around the world. But that glamorous layer and the reality are messier, tangled with affairs, betrayals, and secrets that even her most loyal fans once dismissed as malicious gossip. Time and first-hand accounts have shown otherwise. The most shocking and frankly disturbing truth centers on her affair with Berry Gordy. He wasn't just the man who built Motown, he was her boss and a married father figure. Their relationship, hidden in the shadows, led to the birth of Rhonda Ross Kendrick, while Diana was still married to Robert Ellis Silberstein. For years, the lie was maintained, with Silberstein raising a child that wasn't his. The disgust here comes not just from the deception, but from the cold calculation required to maintain appearances while a family was built on secrecy. Her involvement with Smokey Robinson during his marriage to Claudette was another scandal that rocked the Motown circle. Smokey himself admitted to the affair, but what makes it troubling is how openly betrayal was normalized behind the polished public smiles. Diana didn't just dip into casual romances. She repeatedly crossed lines that wrecked other people's lives. There was also her entanglement with Michael Jackson, a man decades younger and emotionally dependent on her. Whether romantic or not, it raised disturbing questions about blurred boundaries, especially as rumors swirled about intimacy during periods when she was already navigating other relationships. Her marriage to Arnie Ness Jr. looked like a fairy tale until it ended with humiliation after he fathered a child with another woman. Added to that were flings with figures like Gene Simmons, each more chaotic than the last. The truth is, Diana Ross's private life was anything but elegant. Behind the diva image was a trail of secrecy, affairs, and betrayals that stained the legacy she fought so hard to perfect. Tina Turner's abusive marriage to Ike Turner. For years, whispers about Tina Turner's marriage to Ike Turner sounded too horrific to be true. Fans saw the electrifying duo dominate the stage with Proud Mary and River Deep Mountain High, their chemistry looking effortless and dazzling. But what audiences could not see was the darkness that followed Tina when the spotlight dimmed. Rumors of Ike's violent abuse swirled for years, dismissed by many as tabloid exaggerations. In time, Tina's own accounts, backed by court records and testimony, confirmed that the reality was even worse than the whispers. Grip over Tina's life was absolute. He controlled her career decisions, dictated her every move, and demanded exhausting performances. Behind closed doors, he unleashed a pattern of violence that was relentless and cruel. Tina later revealed that he beat her with whatever object was nearby, whether it was a hanger, a shoe stretcher, or his fists, and sometimes scalded her with hot coffee. Their intimate relationship was poisoned as well, often entangled with domination and followed by brutal assaults. It was never love. It was a system of control dressed up as a marriage. The breaking point came in 1976 during a trip to Dallas. After a vicious assault in their limousine, Tina arrived at the hotel bloodied and terrified. That night, she made her escape, slipping away with just 36 cents and a single credit card. She darted across a freeway, bruised and desperate, finally seizing her freedom in one harrowing act of survival. That moment shattered the illusion of the glamorous couple. The rumors were not rumors anymore. They were true. Even after their 1978 divorce, Ike attempted to downplay his abuse, admitting he hit Tina but brushing it off as mutual fighting. But his excuses could not erase the scars or silence the many witnesses who corroborated her story. What had once been dismissed as gossip revealed itself to be one of the ugliest truths in music history. The story of a star forced to endure years of pain, violence, and control before reclaiming her voice. Mary J. Blige's addiction. Among the most disgusting rumors to swirl around Mary J. Blige during the peak of her was that behind the glamorous image of the queen of hip-hop soul, she was drowning in substance use and violent relationships. For a while, many dismissed it as jealous gossip, but Mary herself later confirmed that the whispers were real. The story began with a traumatic childhood that left her scarred long before the spotlight found her. Mary was saved at only 5 years old by a family acquaintance, a secret she carried for nearly 3 decades. That pain grew into an inner storm, and when success arrived, she tried to drown it in bottles and white lines. The ugly rumor that she was drunk and high at award shows was true. In fact, the night she won her very first Grammy, she was under the influence of both substances. The world cheered her victory, but she was quietly sinking. The other half of the rumor revolved around her volatile relationship with Casey Haley of Jodeci. Fans suspected abuse, and once again, the whispers were right. Mary later admitted that the relationship was a nightmare of emotional and physical violence. One moment they were in love, the next she was left humiliated and broken, finding temporary escape only in substance use. Unlike many artists who deny, Mary ripped the mask off her own story. She admitted to the addictions, the fights, the depression, and the destructive cycle that almost destroyed her career and her life. The disgusting truth was that behind the powerhouse voice was a woman bleeding inside, her success paid for in pain and scars. What had once been whispered in gossip columns became one of the rawest realities ever exposed in R&B history. Which of these R&B stories shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments, and be sure to like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you are always first to catch our latest content.